topic is first of all, first stream in like quarter of a year, maybe even. And right now we're going through the opening guide that was written by Pseudo Abstract Matter and Lobo Esquire. And after that, I'll probably just play some games. Alright, let's get going. What do you have?
Okay, so there's the basic D4, D5. You already know it. It's just for like beginners.
Explain it from the start. We're going to do the whole, we're starting from zero. Like imagine everything. I've never played this game before.
Yeah. Okay. So move 1, you want to develop the knights to F3 and F6, because it stops the F7. I call it the F7 attack. In my document, which is just the T0 F7 sack with the queen or with the bishop. So the F7 sacrifice, as we've been calling it, is a sacrifice where you go back to the first turn before any pieces are developed, and you take the pawn that's next to the king that's only defended by the king. So the king is forced to go out into the center, and there are certain checkmating attacks, and there's also a kind of semi-forced draw line, which is like the exiled king. It's a lot of stuff that you kind of need to memorize, and not something you really want to go into.
Exactly.
Unless you're like sort of prepared for it.
Exactly.
So
if you've watched some of my videos, you probably already know about this. But more or less, this used to be a huge problem back in the day, and actually kind of the reason why Turn Zero exists now is because it's a very easy to execute attack, and also it's hard to defend, and even if you defend successfully, you might not even be better. So these days, a lot of the openings in Turn Zero, as well as Standard, obviously, even though no one plays Standard anymore, are designed to protect these two weak squares near the king. And the main two reasons to achieve that is by protecting both the F file, we'll move like knight F3 for example, and in some lines also the diagonal from B6 to F2 or B3 to F7 respectively. So that's probably going to be what a lot of these moves are going to be about. Alright, let's go into your first line.
Okay, so both sides develop their knights to avoid all those complications. Let's do this.
A lot of my approaches, especially, have been to just try and keep it simple, more or less, and try to avoid sharp lines as much as possible, so you actually get to play and not have everything resolve around the first couple of moves.
Yeah, you want to try to get into like a decent middle game or sometimes end game.
Yeah.
You don't want to play an opening that loses by force, which is what I've been like studying a lot.
It's like high risk, low reward. if you try to be too creative sometimes. Well,
sometimes there's high reward in some openings, which is very interesting. So I'll get to that later on.
Right.
But so what I've found, the simplest ways to stop the F7 sack is you can either move the D pawn to D4, or you could push the C pawn either to C3 or C4. Let's start with D4.
Right. This you probably have seen this a bunch on mine games as well, because I've been I think I've played this in like 90% of my games.
Yeah. This is basically the move. Yeah, this is the move that everybody plays. Basically, it's very solid. It just blocks the diagonal that the queen could travel. If Black's queen were to get to B6, then a time travel from B6 to F2 would again do the F2. Would be an F2 sack, but it's like an F7 attack, as I've been calling it. So it just blocks the diagonal on the correct time. You get to play C3 next turn, which blocks the king's diagonal, and you're sitting pretty from here. And often Black will just copy White, because it's very solid for both sides. You don't have to worry about like a really sharp attack immediately crushing you at the beginning of the game most of the time.
While Black always has the first spot to travel to, White is still always up a tempo. So even more so, even more so, it's more difficult for black to try and diverge from the main lines as soon as possible. And the reason why, of course, people play something like c3 here is to eventually block the diagonal, which is and the reason why c3 is most often preferred is because it's a multi-purpose move. The first purpose is obviously to block this triangle from the check later. It also opens up your own queen for the triangle on this diagonal right here to hit the king. And moreover, even though stuff like knight here or b4 or bishop here or queen up is totally playable, you oftentimes find yourself, especially with knight c3, when I first saw people playing this move, what often ends up happening is that if black responds with c6 here, for example, it's often actually quite an illusion that this piece is actually developed, because you can't actually move it that easily. Because if, for example, black goes c6 here, and you later end up moving this knight, for example, if the knight goes here and you capture it, you often find yourself getting checkmated on this square. So c3 is just a totally solid move, multi-purpose.
Yep. And then black follows suit. Didn't put it in the guide, but normally the next move here for both sides is bishop f4, bishop f5. But I'm pretty sure like a lot of moves can be played here. Like e3, e6 is playable. You can move the knight in. That's usually what I do. I usually go knight d2 or knight d7 here. But there's just a ton of stuff you could do. This is like where it branches out. Basically.
Exactly. I'd say the opening probably. This is probably where you can start playing a lot of moves that are playable, simply because the concrete sweats have been dealt with by now, which are of course the f2 and f7 points, and the weakness that you created by covering the second weakness, which was f2, after going d4, closing down this king diagonal. Since both of those have been dealt with, you now have a lot more freedom to play. Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of good moves here. We probably wouldn't go in too much detail here, but often you just try to get developed. I often like going bishop here, for example, so I can block it later with a move like e3. And oftentimes you wanna cover f7 anyway. In some ways or another. But yeah, this is why this is probably the most basic line we currently have in 5D. Which is
it's a very solid.
It's a playable position. I would still say this gives white like quite a large advantage from what I've seen in in most competitive games.
It's interesting.
Yeah, because like you're just always up this tempo, and oftentimes it's just who goes for the kill quicker, right? And even though
it's like Sorry, I was gonna say that I feel like you just kind of have to play positionally for a while. I haven't really found any really sharp attacks that white could set up. Do you agree?
Well, yes and no, because what often ends up happening is if white goes for development and eventually is gonna start introducing some weaknesses, black has to eventually compromise in some way or another. So
interesting.
For example, what a lot of the attacking lines evolve around is after something like bishop here, for example, you now have more freedom to move this knight forward, for example. Because now even if the knight moves, you always have this file blocked. So eventually black is going to have to make like one or two defensive moves, because if you like it's the same as in classical, right? If you just keep copying, eventually the player who strikes first is gonna take it. So if you wanna you have to how do you call it? You have to break symmetry at some point if you want to play for a win as black. And if you try to break symmetry, it often unless your opponent makes like an obvious mistake, it often puts you in an even more disadvantaged position. Which is why I kind of feel like this is hard to play as black at the top level, obviously.
Yeah, I just kind of feel like it's kind of hard to break through as white sometimes. It's like you don't really have a very obvious pawn break, which you normally look for in traditional chess. Um, like the obvious one might be like b4, b5 as white. But it's obviously like very weakening to do something like that. But I guess I have to study some more of your games to understand what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, people are probably getting pretty sick of this because it's been like the majority of what I've been playing. But it's just like we said, it's super solid. You can develop all your pieces. And eventually just go for an attack. And at a certain point, to be fair, games always turn out different. I just think it's pretty funny that even the limited games I've played, what often happens is that people even start to repeat my own moves I played as white against them, and at that point it's already pretty hard to break symmetry as black again. But alright, we're not going for the full middle game guide here. We're trying to go for the openings.
Yep.
Alright, so hit me with the next one.
Okay. For some reason the stream isn't loading for me. Oh, I see it now.
I gave you the next code on the Discord. I should probably hide this somehow, but usually people don't snap the code.
Yep. Okay, so let's go for c4, c5 this time. So you bring the knights out.
Knight is always step one.
Yeah. Very important defensive move. And then c4. So with c4, what you're trying to do is, well, with pushing the c pawn either to c3 or c4, you're trying to control the b file before your opponent gets to the b file. So if I were, for example, to play this move, technically white could play c5 here and go for some tricks. Except in Graven's game, wait, was that Graven's game or was it Romad's? Do you remember that game, Lexi?
I actually played this myself.
Where he pushed c5. Yeah, I think he played c5 here against you.
So, but to start with the opening again, it's again more or less revolving around these f7, f2 weaknesses, but this time the idea is not to block the diagonal just straight up, but rather to control the critical squares the queen would be time traveling from. So so if you control the square and the queen moves out, for example, you can always threaten to just capture it later, and that's more or less the idea, I assume.
Yeah. So from this position, white should probably just play queen b3, and then if I want to trade queens, then I'll play queen b6, and then white will just trade queens here.
Yeah. This might not be obvious for everyone, but if you play, for example, e3 now or d4 now, it's always too late. Because this square is already vulnerable. So black could go, if you push e3 for example now, black can go to d4 on this board later, e3 here, and f2 here, for example. So it really has to be controlling this square, for example, right now. Which is why I probably agree that queen b3 is a playable move here.
Yeah, and then if we do this, we just trade queens. You could technically, you don't have to trade queens technically, but you probably should be if you're just a beginner. You don't have to trade queens because in the main f7 sack line, the timelines catch up, so you could play queen b6 on 0L onto -1L. So your queen is defending the b file again to stop the queen from getting there, because you're kind of trying to defend f2 twice, I guess you could call it. And
let me catch up on chat a little bit. So Coach is asking, what's the strategy when people keep hiding their king on different timelines? There's actually a fairly simple solution to that. Which is, if your opponent keeps exiling their kings, you can use your own queen and go way back to the first board. So you have to make an empty. It's probably best if I just show this myself real quick here. So let's just make some random moves here, and then I'm gonna then I'm gonna show you. So let's do this, and now black starts. I guess you can't do it right now. So let's say black tries to like duplicate the board where he has 2 queens, and then starts to make these inactive timelines where he hides his king. So as you probably know, you don't have to play on these timelines, but you're gonna find it rather difficult to checkmate if your opponent simply has no king. What you can do, however, is he has to play on this board as well, is to take your own queen, like this, for example, because now you can't get a checkmate. But what you can do is, let's go to a board where we don't hang a queen. Probably like this, and now just make some nothing moves. You can just yeet your queen all the way back, and while there's still like some practical issues sometimes, this is more or less the easiest solution to deal with this, because now you're not only back in the timeline where your opponent has a king, but you're back in it with an extra queen, and also you can still time travel 2 more times after this and still have it be active, because black already has an inactive timeline that's active now. He has another one coming up, and now you have an extra queen, and you can be pretty you have a lot of freedom
you can be kind of frugal with your timelines.
You can even sack a queen and still be up material, which is pretty sick. I think that is probably.
But like against Narek, it's a little bit trickier because he has like a sort of defense, I think. So.
No, I don't. There's no defense against this. Trust me. I've played this, I don't know, countless times. People have tried, but it's not a winning strategy.
I agree.
Removed my mod, for example, by accident. Okay, wait. There was something else I wanted to respond to. Oh yeah, the amount of channel points for VIP. I think that's like I think I did some calculations, and it's like if you watch for exactly 69 hours, you get this amount of channel points. Yeah, you can also duplicate boards with 2 kings. That can lead to kind of messy positions though. And my approach has always been to keep it simple as much as possible. And this is one of the things where I feel confident to answer that this is this never works for if you exile without a softmate. If you exile with a softmate, it gets more tricky. But even then, depending on how far it is in the future, you can most likely checkmate your opponent before. This of course gets harder if the queens get traded earlier, for example. But in general, I wouldn't be too afraid of this. You just take it back all the way to a board where your opponent still has a king. And what often ends up happening there is that your opponents eventually get scared and try to exile their king again, which gives you then even more timelines to try and play with. And you can get to these 6 situations. Like you have a lot of freedom in that case, and you just always take it back to the board where your opponent has a king, and eventually they're gonna collapse to the pressure.
The only issue is that if you eventually end up with like 20 or 30 timelines, and the game takes 6 hours because there's infinite delay. But yeah, so there's pluses and minuses, but we'll need to lap more stuff against it, I suppose. Okay, let's get back to c4, c5.
Of course. Whoops. Okay, wait.
Normal openings.
Yeah, I need to give you another code. Right, there you go.
Okay.
So apparently you can't be a mod and VIP at the same time. So that feels bad. Unless I'm doing it wrong.
Okay, so we play out our knights and play c4.
Right, c4.
So yeah, so as black here, I think the best response is to just block this pawn If white were to get their queen onto b3 and then push their pawn, then there could be some bad things that could happen to black if white were to stack their queen on f7 just normally. There are some hacking ideas that white could go for. So just blocking the pawn and make sure that the queen doesn't really do a whole lot on the queen side. Although there are some tactics here. So generally the next move is just to move your knight to c3. It's like a obvious square. So
I actually would agree with this, just from the perspective of keeping it simple. Because right now I would already say this position is playable for both sides again. Because again you've dealt with the threat, and this diagonal is unlikely to open soon again because both pawns are opposing each other. So unless either side goes for like some pawn break with b4 or something, it's unlikely that it will open up. And I actually think I had this as well. As black, and led to a really fun position. So I actually like this opening a lot.
Yeah, I do like these positions. They lead to like interesting tactical situations. Because we move our knights and queens into the game pretty quickly, and there's some gambits that you could try here. Like b4 is an idea. If they play knight out and then d3, b4 is something that I've looked at a lot with Los Bros. They're usually you want to push e3 instead of d3 because opening up, like, you don't really want to move a pawn off that diagonal. You either want to have c3 on the king's diagonal or d2. So you just want to be safe.
Keep in mind, you guys can always read up the exact lines later when the entire document is going to be published. I just wanted to quickly show off a couple of positions that I feel are playable, especially if you're just starting out. Especially the first few lines that we showed.
I do think bringing the knight out is generally like a pretty good idea there.
Yeah, not just for the defensive aspect, but it's also just like developing a piece.
Yeah, exactly.
So it can basically never be like knight of 3, knight of 6 can never be a bad move in my opinion. Thanks a lot. Do you have anything more you want to go over? Or?
There's one more line that's pretty interesting. It's after d4 you could play c5.
Okay, let's go one more line then.
Yeah. That's
don't take that out of context. Alright.
Okay. King.
I'm surprised you can't be a mod and a VIP at the same time. It's actually really weird. Oh well. Alright. Well, what else do we have? I assume knight of 3?
Yep.
Okay, now d4 you said.
And then, yeah, d4. And then I go c5. So these lines are really interesting because this is like one of the few openings where there's like this tension in the center. So I kind of like it because you're trying to attack as black instead of trying to defend. Although there are a lot of risks. For one, like the diagonal to f7 is open. So if they play c3, which is what they normally have to play here, then you have to defend with the queen.
So
you might be able to.
I like this approach a lot. Assuming this is playable, I like this especially because it more or less combines both of the ideas we were talking about earlier, which is one side tries to block the diagonal entirely, and the other one tries to control the critical square on b3 and b6. So this actually makes a lot of sense, and if this is playable, especially like this because black, it's a way for black to quickly break symmetry.
Yeah, exactly. You get into really sharp lines pretty early on, so I don't really recommend beginners to play this.
I can see that.
Although I could try to trade queens here, and then it's more or less an equal position, I think. I kind of think that black is a little bit better in those lines, just because they have a little bit more activity with their knights. But I'm sure it doesn't really.
Let's take it one at a time.
Yeah.
I feel like this is
But,
already kind of tough to analyze in depth.
Yeah, definitely.
Because there's already a lot going on, and I think White has a lot of options here. What they can do actually.
Yeah. I would say
I think
best would it's already a complicated game. So I think E3 has been tried a lot, and it leads to pretty good positions for White. So I don't want to like spoil a lot of my prep, but like taking a pawn is a little bit risky. There's a lot of risky moves for White in this position.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's always interesting. So
I think that's a good spot to end it on. Maybe like one last note I wanted to go into is if for example if you ever end up in a queen up position like this, for example, I think it often favors the person that captures back. In this case,
I agree with that.
Is White, because it opens up your rook for free, and rooks especially are kind of hard to develop in 5D chess often. So whenever you get to develop one of them, it's a really nice touch. And Black probably felt inclined to trade here because White was hitting the trademark F7.
Yep. So
I like the structure a lot. And I think if you kind of want to like maybe gather the first couple of positions, you already have a decent mix of completely playable lines. So I already like this a lot, and who knows? Then there might be some different structures that are coming there later as well. And you should of course show all of your prep in the league.
There's actually a lot of interesting choices for Black, because Black could actually defend by going to Queen A5 pretty early on. I could just show that on stream if you want. There's this interesting idea that I found a couple weeks ago. If you want to get into another game. Okay.
Okay, let's do one absolute last then.
You want last thing.
Okay.
Because it's a really cool idea.
Right. We always love cool ideas here.
Yeah.
What's up, Alien?
Queen. King.
Tag magic tricks? Yeah, it's tag magic tricks. We're doing some magic tricks here.
Yep.
Psychological horror wasn't the thing to collect on Twitch, unfortunately. Alright, so same line as before, right?
Yeah, it's just a normal d4, and then I play stuff.
Yeah, and then you play stuff. Alright.
Yep. So I could actually play this here because there is a defense after c3 and going for the sack, and it doesn't have to do with defending the b file. It's actually defending horizontally. So if you do the sacrifice here, then I could go all the way back right here.
Oh, and then you're gonna capture the queen. Ah, this is cool.
Yeah. So this is a really neat idea, I think. And then White technically lost the queen, but on this bottom board, he's technically up 2 tempo. So it's like a really interesting position, I think, and Black is really strong up here. I guess down there, where he has an extra queen, he doesn't have to worry about this f7 pawn anymore. But yeah, I want to see a lot of games in this line.
That's like for cool. The people who love playing on multiple timelines.
Yeah, exactly.
As everyone probably knows, I'm not one of them. So you will probably not see me play this. But it's cool to see that there's more openings that feature more timelines, especially with this Queen A5 idea.
Yeah, I think that White has a little bit more leeway in the opening, just because they have the extra tempo and they can kind of stop Black from performing an f7 sack on them. Usually by sacrificing the bishop on f7 first. But yeah, I think like this one idea kind of brings it back to Black's hand, that they don't really have to worry about an f7 sack because they could just take the queen that's doing the sack.
Yeah, it certainly looks kind of cool, especially with the queen right here, which is now guarding f7. Looks kind of funny.
Exactly. It's pretty awesome.
It's like a glass cannon staring at f2 and at the same time being f7. Very cool. I actually believe so, I had this recommended at some point as well in one of the games I played, but I've never seen this in practical, at least not in an opening line like this. But it's good to see that there's finally some ideas evolving around the turn 0 board, which are giving Black this defense, which is why it was such an issue in the original standard, where this simply didn't exist, and after this you are basically already entering a degenerate game. Alright, well, thanks a lot for showing these lines off, and I encourage everyone to check out the document once it's released, and maybe even add to it as well. I'm sure this is an ongoing process of introducing new ideas that people have, or combining them for more and more lines.
Yeah,